Photography instructor Diana Walsh first noticed the autonomous shadows while developing film in her darkroom at Denver Community College on a snowy Thursday evening in February 1994, when she was processing student work from that week's assignment on natural lighting techniques. As she hung the prints to dry, she observed shadows in the photographs that appeared to be moving independently of their corresponding subjects, creating compositions that defied the basic principles of light and shadow relationship. The photographs had been taken by her advanced student, Kevin Martinez, a 19-year-old art major who possessed an intuitive understanding of composition but struggled with the technical aspects of manual camera operation. Kevin had submitted 12 black and white prints documenting various subjects around campus: students walking between classes, trees casting shadows on pathways, architectural details of older buildings, all captured with competent exposure and focus that suggested his skills were rapidly improving. What disturbed Diana was the shadow behavior visible in every single photograph. In an image of a student walking past the library, the student's shadow appeared several feet ahead of his position, as if it had detached from his body and was leading him forward. A photograph of tree branches showed shadows that curved and twisted in directions that contradicted the actual position of the branches above. Most unsettling was an image of the campus bell tower, where the shadow fell across the courtyard in a perfect spiral pattern despite the tower's straight, angular architecture. Diana had been teaching photography for 12 years and had developed thousands of prints without encountering anything that challenged her understanding of how light interacts with physical objects. She initially suspected equipment malfunction or chemical processing errors, but her careful review of Kevin's contact sheets revealed that the shadow anomalies were consistent across all frames, suggesting the phenomena had been captured during the actual photography rather than introduced during development. The following morning, Diana asked Kevin to meet her in the darkroom to discuss his submission. Kevin arrived with the enthusiasm typical of students eager to receive feedback on their work. But his expression shifted to confusion and concern as Diana pointed out the shadow irregularities in his photographs. Kevin insisted that he had observed nothing unusual while taking the pictures and had followed standard procedures for outdoor photography in natural lighting conditions. Kevin described his shooting process in detail, explaining that he had spent approximately 3 hours moving around campus to capture 12 different compositions. He had used Diana's recommended technique of observing shadow patterns before setting up each shot, ensuring that the interplay of light and shadow would create visual interest in the final prints. At no point during the photography session had he noticed shadows behaving contrary to their physical sources. Diana suggested they return to the locations where Kevin had taken his photographs, hoping to identify environmental factors that might explain the shadow anomalies. They began with the library courtyard, where Kevin had photographed the student whose shadow appeared to lead rather than follow his movement. Standing in the same location during the early afternoon, they observed normal shadow behavior. Students' shadows trailing behind them at angles consistent with the sun's position overhead. The investigation continued at the bell tower location, where Kevin had captured the spiral shadow pattern that contradicted the tower's geometric architecture. Diana brought her own camera to document the actual shadow cast by the tower at the same time of day when Kevin had made his original photograph. Her images showed conventional angular shadows that matched the tower's straight lines and rectangular foundation, bearing no resemblance to the spiral patterns visible in Kevin's prints. Diana realized that Kevin's photographs were documenting phenomena that existed beyond normal visual perception, somehow capturing shadow behavior that was invisible to the naked eye but recorded by the camera's film emulsion. This possibility both fascinated and terrified her, as it suggested that photography could reveal aspects of reality that human consciousness was unable to process directly. Kevin proved to be an invaluable research partner, approaching the mystery with the fearless curiosity of someone young enough to accept the impossible without the skepticism that experience typically brings. He suggested they conduct controlled experiments using different cameras, film types, and lighting conditions to determine whether the shadow anomalies were specific to particular equipment or represented a broader phenomenon affecting photographic documentation of the campus environment. Their first controlled experiment involved photographing the same subjects using multiple cameras simultaneously. Diana used her professional Nikon, while Kevin operated the school's backup Canon, both loaded with identical film stock and set to matching exposure settings. They photographed 10 different locations around campus, maintaining careful documentation of time, lighting conditions, and camera positions. When they developed both sets of film, the results confirmed their worst fears. Both cameras had captured identical shadow anomalies, eliminating equipment malfunction as an explanation for the phenomena. The autonomous shadows appeared in every photograph, regardless of which camera had been used or who had operated it. The shadows seemed to exist as independent entities that chose to reveal themselves through photographic documentation while remaining invisible to direct observation. Diana's research into the campus history revealed disturbing information that provided context for their supernatural discovery. Denver Community College had been built in 1967 on the site of the former Colorado State Hospital, a psychiatric facility that had operated from 1879 to 1961. The hospital had housed thousands of patients during its 82 years of operation, including many individuals who had died while under institutional care. The hospital's closure had been precipitated by scandals involving patient mistreatment, overcrowding, and inadequate medical care that resulted in preventable deaths. State investigations during the late 1950s had documented horrific conditions, including patients who were physically restrained for extended periods, individuals who died from neglect, and burial practices that failed to maintain proper records of deceased patients. Many former patients had been interred in unmarked graves on the hospital grounds, their identities lost when institutional records were destroyed during the facility's demolition. Diana realized that the autonomous shadows might represent the continuing presence of former hospital patients whose deaths had gone unacknowledged and whose final resting places remained unmarked. The shadows appear to be attempting to communicate their existence through the only medium that could capture their presence: photographic emulsion sensitive to light wavelengths beyond normal human vision. Kevin's subsequent photography sessions revealed that the shadow phenomena intensified in certain areas of the campus that corresponded to locations where the hospital's most troubled patients had been housed. The administration building, constructed over the former psychiatric ward, produced photographs showing shadows that moved in agitated patterns suggestive of pacing and restless movement. The library, built above the hospital's former isolation units, generated images with shadows that appeared to reach toward the camera, as if seeking connection or recognition. The breakthrough in their investigation came when Diana noticed that some of the autonomous shadows appeared to be forming recognizable patterns. In several photographs, shadows arranged themselves into shapes that resembled letters or numbers, as if attempting to spell out messages. Diana and Kevin spent hours analyzing these shadow formations, gradually deciphering what appeared to be names and dates that corresponded to former hospital patients. Their most significant discovery occurred when they successfully interpreted a series of shadow messages that spelled out Mary Collins 1923 to 1958 in one photograph and Section 7 Row 12 in another. Research at the Denver Public Library's Historical Archives revealed that Mary Collins had indeed been a patient at Colorado State Hospital who had died in 1958 under circumstances that were never fully investigated. The numbers appeared to reference burial locations in the Potter's Field where unidentified patients had been interred. Kevin suggested they attempt direct communication with the shadow entities by asking specific questions during photography sessions and analyzing the resulting prints for responsive shadow formations. Their first attempts at communication yielded shadows that formed clear yes and no patterns when Diana asked whether the shadows represented deceased hospital patients seeking recognition of their existence. The shadow entities became increasingly responsive as Diana and Kevin continued their communication efforts. The shadows began forming more complex messages, including names of other deceased patients, dates of death, and references to specific locations on the former hospital grounds where bodies had been buried without proper documentation. The entities appeared to be providing information that could help identify unmarked graves and restore dignity to patients whose deaths had been ignored by institutional authorities. Diana made the decision to contact the Colorado Historical Society with their findings, hoping to initiate a proper archaeological investigation of the campus grounds. She presented carefully selected photographs that documented the shadow formations without revealing the supernatural nature of their communication with deceased patients. Her request focused on the historical significance of properly identifying and memorializing patients who had died during the hospital's operation. The Historical Society's investigation confirmed the existence of unmarked burial sites throughout the campus grounds. Ground-penetrating radar detected numerous burial locations that corresponded to the information provided by the shadow entities through Kevin's photographs. The discovery led to a comprehensive archaeological project that eventually identified over 200 unmarked graves, many containing the remains of patients whose identities had been lost for decades. As the archaeological investigation progressed and proper markers were installed for the identified graves, the shadow phenomena gradually diminished. Diana and Kevin documented the transition through continued photography sessions, observing that the autonomous shadows became less agitated and more peaceful as recognition was given to the forgotten patients. The shadows began appearing in more natural positions, as if the entities were finally able to rest after decades of trying to communicate their need for acknowledgement. Kevin's final photography project for Diana's class consisted of portraits of the newly installed grave markers, each photograph showing normal shadow behavior that reflected the peace achieved through proper recognition of the deceased patients. His technical skills had improved dramatically during their investigation. But more importantly, his understanding of photography's potential to document invisible realities had transformed his approach to the medium. Diana continued teaching at Denver Community College while maintaining her private archive of photographs documenting the shadow phenomena. She developed new curriculum emphasizing photography's role in historical documentation and social justice, using her experience with the shadow entities to illustrate how camera technology could reveal aspects of reality that required attention and action from the living community. The campus memorial garden, established where the hospital's main building had once stood, features plaques honoring patients who died during the facility's operation. Many of the names on these plaques were provided through the shadow communications that Diana and Kevin had documented during their investigation. The memorial serves both as recognition for forgotten individuals and as acknowledgement that some forms of institutional injustice leave impressions that persist long after the physical structures are demolished. Kevin graduated with honors and pursued advanced studies in documentary photography, specializing in projects that give voice to marginalized communities and forgotten histories. His undergraduate experience with the autonomous shadows taught him that photography could serve purposes beyond artistic expression, functioning as a tool for social justice and historical correction. Years later, Diana still occasionally observes unusual shadow behavior in photographs taken on campus. Though the phenomena are now subtle and peaceful rather than urgent and agitated, she interprets these gentle anomalies as evidence that the memorial garden and proper grave markers have provided the recognition that the deceased patients sought for so many decades. The shadows that once moved without their subjects now rest quietly, their mission of communication finally complete. The investigation proved that some injustices leave impressions that transcend death, creating phenomena that persist until acknowledgement and correction are provided by the living. Diana's darkroom became a place where the invisible became visible, where forgotten voices found expression through the interplay of light and shadow, where photography served its highest purpose as a medium for truth recognition, where ultimately peace for those who have been denied dignity in life but achieved it through the persistence of their shadows. This was another tale from the S.T.F Horror Vault. If you felt the chill tonight, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. New stories open soon. And remember, the vault is always waiting.